All right, we're on to lesson two. So now that you've decided if your main goal is going to be maximizing cash flow or maximizing appreciation, we go on to step two, which is going to be defining your property criteria. And you're going to start with property type. Do you want a single family, a duplex, 3 or 4 unit, or do you want a large multifamily property? That's one of the very most important things to figure out with your criteria. What type of property you're actually going to buy. And then once you decide, oh, I'm going to buy a duplex or single family or a 4 unit, now you got to decide, do you want a ranch, a 2 story, a split level, or are you open to different options there? All right. After that, you're going to go and you're going to decide what type of bedroom and bathroom count you're going to go for, whether it's a single family or multifamily. That's pretty important. The next thing you're going to try to figure out, what type of foundation do you want? Do you want to have it? Do you want the property to have a basement, a crawl space? Do you want it to have a slab foundation? For rental properties, especially the older ones, I really try to avoid basements. Um, they just get water in them so often, and renters aren't really going to always notify you if there's water getting in the basement. So that can lead to mold, different things like that. But again, I wouldn't completely rule out basements. I try to just focus on properties that don't have basements if possible. So the next thing you want to figure out, what age of property do you want? I try to avoid properties built before 1950. Each generation of building has its own styles with their pros and cons, and we'll dive more into that later. An example that fits my exact property criteria would be a ranch home built after the 1950s or in the 1950s. That's just kind of the cutoff. No basement, and then 3 or 2 bedrooms between 800 and 1,200 square feet in Washington, Peoria Heights, or North Peoria, somewhere with a good school district. So, as you see, that's a pretty narrow criteria. So, narrowing down your criteria makes it where if any of these properties come on the market, you're really going to be able to decide which one is the best for you pretty quickly. Um, and as I mentioned before, location is going to be really, really key. So before you even get started, part of your criteria is going to be where are you going to buy these properties, and you need to get that figured out in the beginning. That's obviously pretty crucial, or else you don't really know where to look. So I wouldn't really have like 5 different cities. Like I want to buy in any of these cities. I would really narrow it down to just one city. And then after you decide, all right, what metropolitan area am I willing to invest in? That's when you want to break it down even further. So after that, you're going to break it down into different submarkets within that same metropolitan area, and all these submarkets are going to appreciate at different rates, have different cash flow. And then, as we talked in the last lesson, the more a property is expected to appreciate, you're probably not going to get as much cash flow on that. So there's trade-offs there. Um, but when you decide what metropolitan area you actually want to invest in order to decide, you really need to do some research on the demographics. That's really important. Jobs, crime, schools, anything else that would indicate if this is a desirable submarket within the metropolitan area you've already selected. As I said before, school districts are very important. So I divide school districts actually into their own submarkets. So I'll evaluate properties a lot differently depending on what school district they're in when I'm looking to invest. Um, so once you choose a submarket, you really should start researching individual neighborhoods within that submarket. So now you're breaking it down even more. If you really, for example, you're okay, one submarket in Peoria, Illinois, the metro area is going to be Washington. That's a submarket, but not all neighborhoods in Washington are the same. So if you decide you want to buy in Washington, Illinois, for example, you need to really get to know the different grade school districts and then the different neighborhoods, because let's say there's a highway going through town, the houses might be really close together, but on one side of the highway they might be a lot more desirable to live in that neighborhood for different reasons. And so it's important to really know that, because you can't just be like, oh, it's a Washington address and it fits the right price. Maybe it's not in the most desirable part, maybe it is, but that's something you really need to figure out. And by neighborhood, I'm talking narrow it down to a 1 to 2 mile radius, but also pay attention to those different pockets and actual dividing lines like a highway or maybe a different grade school district in the same town. Start researching those individually. Maybe look at the statistics on the home sales, the demographics on income. That's really important when you're evaluating that. So what I've done is when I really decide, all right, I really want to know this submarket very well, I'm going to go through every single recorded sale in that neighborhood over the last 3 years. And if you've broken it down to a pretty narrow area, it's not going to be like there's 1,000 properties you've got to go through. So you could probably pull up in one neighborhood, maybe there's been 30 or 40 home sales over the last couple of years. It's pretty easy to get an idea of what the value should be on those homes. So you can use Zillow actually to filter all the past sales for the property type, and you can use a draw tool to actually circle what area you want to see data on the past home sales. Another thing you can do, you can set a price range for your property type in your target neighborhood. So you may have already narrowed down how much money you want to spend and see what kind of deals you can get in that price range. So you can filter out everything that's let's say way over your budget, or maybe it's so cheap that it's a disaster of a property and it might take a lot of work to fix up. So you can use that tool for that. For example, I'm always interested in 3 bedroom, 1 bath homes in Washington under 80,000. So that's just a little bit of how you can narrow down your property criteria. I hope that helps you understand a little bit of my thought process when it comes to that. And we'll move on to the next lesson. How's that sound?